There are also some associated conditions with autism spectrum disorder, with some intellectual disabilities and actually some other conditions. With the intellectual disabilities, three-quarter of children with autism spectrum disorder do have intellectual disabilities. Learning disabilities, there are some specific impairments in the executive function, which is more of the cognitive task, organizing, and processing information. Epilepsy, children with epilepsy, there's about a quarter of them that do have some most signs of autism spectrum disorder, but it's mostly found in the infants and the adolescent age. There are tic disorders. Up to 9% of children with autism spectrum disorder do have tic disorders or a mild form of Tourette's. And these are just brief and involuntary different motor movements. There's also some sleep disorders. 50 to 70% of children with autism do have some type of sleep disorder. It could include night walking, delayed sleep, early morning waking, and then that sometimes leads into daytime inattention or irritability. There's also gastrointestinal symptoms. There's an increase in pain in their gastrointestinal area. There's reflux. They have diarrhea, constipation, bloating, so there's just that constant uncomfortness. There are some psychiatric disorders. They're at a greater risk of depression, mood disorders, ADD, and also anxieties. So there's also some conditions that are out there, some genetic disorders that are also related to autism. And tuberous sclerosis, it affects the TSC2 gene, and this, in effect, really just causes skin lesions, pigmentation, patches, acne, edema, and this you can see in about 1 to 4% of children with autism. Fragile X syndrome, the individuals with Fragile X have many symptoms of autism spectrum disorders, and chromosome 15 deletion, and this is most commonly known as Prader-Willi syndrome and Angelman syndrome. There are some treatment approaches for autism. There's the educational end, which is plan teaching, organizing, good sufficient staffing, structured environment, reinforcements, and the instruction is very specific to what the child's needs are. There's TEA-CCH, which is a treatment of educational and autistic and related communication with handicapped children. And it's a very intense program. It's one of the initial programs that were first out, and involves the school and parents training. There is the applied behavior analysis, which is also known as the ABA, and it teaches the component of skills necessary to develop language and behavior skills. There's developmental, individual differences, relationship-based model, and this is more of the social communication, and it teaches the family and the educational team to be on the same page for the child. There's also relationship development intervention, which is RDI, and it's social learning, and the adult actually leads the child through the interactions and the learning. And there's also classroom-based programs, which you share. The student's individual needs must be met, and in order for that to be met, many times the IEP comes into effect, but based on what their educational needs are, what their environmental needs are, that has to be met in classroom-based programs. There's also some behavioral interventions. It's important to educate the child in them understanding the importance of communicating and socialization with others. They're under the behavioral interventions. Daily routines are extremely helpful. Functional behavior plans, this is where you see what behavior is interfering with the children learning, and from that point you can come up with a plan where the child and the staff go through a series of learning that particular skill and in that environment. Pragmatic language and social skills training. This can make a big difference for children as they begin to get older through adolescence and young adulthood, for them to be employed and possibly living independently. There are some medications that some children do take. There's some stimulants. There's some selective serotonin inhibitors. There's some atypical neuroleptics, and many times some of the children with autism do require some mood stabilizers. So in summary, basically children with autism spectrum disorders have or may have some intellect disabilities, but do have some communication impairments. It's difficulty with them socializing, with the interactions, communicating, and often they will display repetitive behaviors and have a difficulty showing some social interactions. Early recognition and intervention is extremely important, and it's had a positive impact and outcome on the quality of life for children with autism. Thank you very much.